Okay, this is one with a little different flavor, and it might even strike some of my regulars as outlandish. It might strike people as being, any number of things you could put on it in a modern PC culture type of concept. But I want to make a correlation that a lot of people have been trying to do. I still have yet to read the book that I am told that I really should read. For years ago, when I made a comment on somebody else's thing, and I made connections for a guy, he turned around and told me, and to be honest with you, I thought he was talking about Arthur C. Clarke or something, in the fantasy deals or something. And I've read, a lot of his books, not all of them, and I didn't know what his reference was toward, but I didn't write it down like, oh, I got to find out about that or anything, and so not. But I got that happen to me again and again, and it must be, 10, 15 times now I've been told that you're making connections that are like this, and they compare things that I'm saying to that. And I don't like that. Now, I don't even know what he says, but just the sound of that some of the times makes me think that he's probably some Aryan neo-Nazi freak out or something like that, right? Or he probably one of those guys that's going to, whenever you start reading, it tells you that spaceships came down in Sitchin and a giant planet's going to hit us and we're all doomed, and or something along that line. And I've left it alone because for years I've steered away from anything like that I don't feel has academic resource to it. The sad thing about that is that some of these people have a lot right. Some of these people have got a lot right. And I see it in little pieces of stuff. And I'll see somebody try to make a reveal video, kind of like I do. And usually they're coming on with spooky sounds and stuff and showing you stuff. And I'd like to do that for drama, but I'd feel like I was putting on a kid puppet show instead of showing you the information or talking to you like an adult. I tried to do a few of them, and even one of the ones about Halloween, and I tried to do it as a campfire tale. It just didn't. Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, so point being, we're going to get into this, and I may just let this go till it locks up and the video's gone. And I want your thoughts and everything afterwards. By the way, hit like, share, and hit that bell too. Make sure it's on, because a lot of people are getting screwed over on it. Anyhow, I've been told here recently, again, a wave has happened, and there's been one regular who I love the comments of and things, and have gotten to know fairly well, who has said repeatedly this same person, an author. And now I've had two other guys say it to me too, in a separate way. And then I was talking last night to a guy, and he brought it up. And so I got to get that damn book. And he said, I'd let you borrow mine, but I gave it to somebody else or whatever and everything. I said, oh, well, hell, I'll try to find one for cheap. And he goes, man, they're more than $50, but you probably find one that somebody's read for cheap or whatever. And I said, I'll give it a shot. Hell, I could probably find it online somehow. Somebody's put it in, or maybe somebody's even tabulated it to where somebody famous reads it, and you can just buy it that way and have it read to you. Although I really like to have referencing things, and if I'm going to buy a book, I start putting stickies and little notes out on the side, and I fuck up a book pretty good. If it's got to do with anything that I've got to do with. And then a book that doesn't even, but it's got a reference in it that means something, and I put a little marker inside there and stuff, and bend the corner and slide a little paper in there. When you flip, it goes right to these ones that's like, well, what's this? Anyhow, so I've steered away from crap like this, and I still don't know fully what I'm talking about that this man is saying, but I'm going to go ahead and make this presentation. We're looking at the Mask of King Tut, and I believe this is after they had fixed the chin on him. The chin had been broken off in earlier days, and then they re-put it back on, and it looked like crap, but then it also kind of came off. And so they they had to redo it, and they cleaned it all the way back up and reset it now. And supposedly you could pick the whole thing up by it, but it'd probably bend his face. But it ain't coming off too easy. But then again, also by just applying the heat from the inside real good, you could pop it back off again. So if it ever got caught on fire, of course, it's gold, and if it doesn't get past a certain point, it ain't gonna melt. But it gets over what, 350, 400 degrees for a little while, and its little chin will go dink and fall off. So anyhow, this is telling you that this is about DNA and genetics of King Tut. And if you look at him here, there's no other way to see that he has a very aquiline nose and his features to him. But when they did a reconstruction of him, he doesn't quite look like that. Well, that's that Fabio. Listen, everybody, right now, if you're listening, if they made a novel about you, like one of those Harlequin romance novels, and you were on the picture of it, every damn one of you would look like Fabio, and it wouldn't look like they just clipped your face out and you're putting a little thing in front of your face and now it's Fabio with your face. They would Fabio you out. Well, they didn't necessarily Fabio these guys like Greek gods perhaps, but they had a look, so everybody gets into that. Surprising DNA results that sent Egyptology into a tizzy. No other contemporary author has done more to establish roots for the Whyte race, to painstakingly and eloquently establish a comprehensive history and understanding of Whyte history than Rhodesian nationalist, writer, and scholar Arthur Kemp. And you can kind of see how I might have gotten Arthur C. Clarke out of Arthur Kemp, I guess, but I just didn't relate it at the time of first hearing it. And once I figured out he was different, it's almost a steer away thing. I've said before I steered away from Sitchin because people are like, man, and so I didn't. And once I finally looked into it, it's amazing that I see connections, but also I could see the disconnect of reality, and I couldn't find any tablets that go anywhere near it, and all that other stuff he made up with their prose. But there are connections that they do make about planets in order, and knowing that the sun is like other stars, but as a torch far in the distance, and that the earth was round and 360 degrees in 12 hours, and all these things that we still use today. Sometimes I think that, hey, the terms that we use today, is that the only thing holding us back? Is it the concept behind a term that we use? Like dark matter? Does that just mean it's not lit up? So every sun that ever died and everything and all the shit that's inside of a black hole doesn't get counted, and whenever you figure that in, you're like, oh, all right, so okay, so there's no big thing, but then what's this dark energy? Anyhow, I'm not going to get into that crap. Two of his seminal works, March of the Titans, is what I keep hearing, A History of the White Race, and Children of Ra, and I've heard that a few times too, describe the historical and physical evidence for white Egyptian origins. In March of the Titans, Kemp writes, although situated in North Africa, Egypt has been settled by three white groups prior to 3500 BC. And I have correlation to that also, and I've made multiple videos, and that's one of the things that keeps getting echoed at me. Namely, old European Mediterranean types, yeah, Proto-Nordics, yep, and Nordic Indo-Europeans. Yeah, I just call them Proto-Indo-Europeans, yeah, and that's reflected in the Nakada and Mediterainian culture and the Natufian culture, too, that come into there. And it seems like, though, one of these was there, and the other two came in two separate waves. And Nakada goes back like 12,006, 12,007 BC. So then we have a timeline of that coming in too, and the others wouldn't have gone past them and been not a part of them in any way, and it finds a hard correlation, so you'd have to say they must have been there before. Regardless of dating of skulls that they have found, common sense would almost believe that it had to happen that way, right? And they connect to early Proto-Indo-European farmers and early hunter-gatherers in Europe and Anatolia, and then the grains and cattle all come from there. And I've talked about that a bunch of times, and he must do the same and make a bunch of the connections that I do myself. But when he says prior to 3500 BC, I find that at least at the time we're talking about of 12,700, they're already there. It seems it goes back way more than that. And some genetics guy came up with a thing, and so it gave me the secondary date of over 22,000 BC, 22,000X, 22,006, something like that, and everything. And of course, every time I see a skull, and they say and everything, and of course they always going to say earliest skull, and I go, man, that guy had a dad. Unless you're going to make him the pioneer, it goes back maybe earlier. And sure, it takes a couple of generations of people to make 100 years even nowadays, but hell, if it went back 6, 8, or 10, man, it's going to start changing your idea of what you just said a little bit. It doesn't seem to matter so much when you get back into that 10,000 BC. People just fade into a glow because we've been so trapped with trying to believe a biblical idea that we have no concept of how to connect stuff. And that's why I decided to go into it, because it seemed like nobody knew anything when I was a kid. They thought you were Ugg at 4,000 years ago, and here's some couple of anomalies, and they're cave art. And I'm like, what? You know, and it seemed like they were coming up with more dinosaur skeletons than they were coming up with people. And it just didn't make sense to me either in a lot of ways, and I've been around and around the bush and up north, down south, back east, and all which ways trying to make sense of it. And after I did all of that, I found I left a trail behind me, and I made this web. And once I started walking around on it, it did all connect, and wow. And that's what I try to talk to you about. And this web has become quite the thing over years. And I really need this guy's book. And so I agree with that somehow. He says the later groups penetrating the territory is part of the great wave of Indo-European invasions which took place from 56 BC onward. And I think we're looking at the last one when you're looking at 56 BC onward. And I keep having a connective that shows Sumerian connections, and the reason why that cuneiform is identical, and starting out with rolled cylinder seals and iconography that's even shown on the Narmer palette with those long-necked creatures and things like that all connect back. And there's lapis lazuli and all these things, so it just makes too many connections to say that there wasn't a component in that was well versed with each other at least. And then you see these connections of boats and reed boats and things, and it was earlier in Samaria, and you go, okay, so this Bedarian type culture was there, and then this Sumerian influx, and that tried to make a unity, but there was still a delta in that area, and the Horners that were already there that are Caucasians too, right? In this land of punt situation, and how that breaks down and turns into the earliest of dynasties. And it's very confusing, and really all you can do is get at a certain point and say, well, here we are at A, and then it's like this right here at B, and then C, and we kind of that's kind of the idea. And here's the first dynasty, and from there it's a little shaky, but this is what happens in Zoom, right? And then we're not sure too, because of Manetho and da and what, but you know, anyhow, I've done videos on a few of these concepts and had them in there. So he goes on, this period is known as the pre-dynastic period. The author John Anthony West, who just recently died, and geologist Robert Schoch proved that the Sphinx was actually created during this period of Whyte habitation. And yeah, they thought that it was a natural outcropping, and it probably looked like a lion, or it was Anubis in ancient times. And that just makes a lot of sense. And then later, after the mane perhaps was ruined, or the nose fell off, or who knows what, they started in cutting it down into an Egyptian face. And but it even looks like that whole top piece was somehow brought across and shoved onto the top of it, and re-put that head onto there, and then it was recarved even after that. So it wasn't the original, and there may have been people living there checking that out the whole time. One thing I like to try to mention, and I never do in most of my videos, where it's probably a thought in the back of my mind, and I just say things like "and stuff," is that people have to realize that at the last ice age, so after 10,000 BC, in the area that we're talking about coming out of, everybody was shoved a lot more central and a lot more Middle Earth, and that's what Mediterrainian means. And so there would have been a lot of influxes, and if things happened in the cold areas and bad winters, it might drive people down. But you can find people who don't mind living in that area, and you can see it in Scandinavians and North Americans and things today, that the winter's a part they cherish and stuff. And that goes back to before we were knowing to call each other something, okay? So, but you also can see a connective to the idea that before the last ice age, and hitting 50, 60,000 years ago and on past, that it would have been all the way expanded as far as we are now, right? And global maximum, global minimum, da-da-da. So it could have expanded to there. And the recent one that we know about is boom, and then the Younger Dryas event, and then slam, and it hit us again, and here we are like a pulse on a heartbeat with that anomaly. And that anomaly goes with a whole lot of events that probably caused this first come down that I'm talking about. Were there already people here? Yeah. Were they related? Distantly, but yes, definitely. And together, they all form Voltron. If you've ever seen it, it's where each one has an incredible good component, but they can't quite defeat the beast. But whenever they put it all together, they form a giant creature that can do so many things. And I used that as a joke one time, and it just beamed on me so hard how that's a reality that's never used and talked about, and a good thing to, it's one of those little pictures you can put in somebody's head. So journalist Graham Hancock has also linked the true origins of the Great Pyramids to this time as well, according to Kemp. A bone figure of a woman with blue eyes, which I've shown you recently, made of ivory, made from inset lapis lazuli, these crystal eyes, from Upper Egypt, is from the early pre-dynastic period, Nakata, and is from the ancient Egyptians, often used lapis lazuli to illustrate eye color in their artwork. The only problem is that lapis lazuli comes from Afghanistan and across and in Mesopotamia, in Zagros Mountains and the things that I've talked much about. And so therefore, there's another connection, but also you can see that same lapis lazuli eyes in the Sumerians. And I show it in so many videos, y'all are probably sick of it now, but here are our earliest dynastic from, let's see, in this picture from 4th dynasty, 5th, 8th, 12th, and then even much later at Nefertiti, she has one blue eye left. Some of these look a little silver or gray at this time, but if you turn just right and get in front of them just right, they turn red. It's wicked. And here's Thuya and Yuya. This is the grandparents of King Tut himself, an Akhenaten that everybody knows about, and how he changed everything and had this horse face. That's his parents. And the dad part here, funny, he looks just like Abe Lincoln with a blonde hairdo and red-haired. And everybody has Caucasian hair to them, but it's not just that. You can identify that they have red, auburn, blonde hair and so on. And at first they thought maybe the natron processes and things did it. They tried it on hairs and nothing affected whatsoever. But then they also realized that if that was the effect, then they wouldn't have a brown, auburn, red, brown, blonde, auburn, blonde, brown, red. It would have some type of effect where, oh, they're all fading out this way or fading out that way. Not that they actually have distinct hair that now today would make a good wig. And they realized hair in that situation really doesn't change. Always like this mummy, looks like she's smiling. That's Hatshepsut. Most people are unaware of this reality regarding ancient Egyptian civilizations. Indeed, in early 1990s, U.S. schools were pushing Afrocentrism in predominantly black schools, stating that the Egyptians, and indeed all great civilizations of ancient history, were products of black sub-Saharan Africa. In other words, what they really were doing at that time was trying to say, well, they all set out of Africa, and we're the most primitive, and it all comes from us. And while that's disgusting to look back at, they were straightforward pushing this idea. And they still to this day, black people, when they get on my videos, tell me that we all come from them, even though they're the oldest skeleton they found that's proto-Negroid even is only 9100 BC. They predate no one. And we have a common ancestor, but then that, of course, doesn't say nobody predates anybody. The one that can end up flying and ended up being spacemen also makes a difference in this whole endeavor. More coffee. And there's a lot of things. There's one that heralded mankind, and then the other one is taught false dogma in their own church. They're led to believe that Jesus may not have been a white person. He's all mixed between us all somehow magically, even though it clearly says his head and his hair are white. Blacks try to use that because they say, well, he says like wool, so he had woolly hair. And he goes, no, his head and his hair are white, comma, like wool. White like wool. Where are you getting any texture, anything? And black people can tease out their hair like wool, but Jesus is just like he's pictured. He's what blacks would call whitey cracker Jesus. Disgustingly. But they're taught that, and they're taught strange beliefs, and then they get this strange idea in their head that North Africa has to have been, well, to make their line work, North Africa has to have been all Caucasian, all blacks. So it was all Negroid right to the Nile, and they waved across the river at Caucasians and stuff. And that's the way that it must have worked out. But everybody wanted their knowledge. And it's kind of odd because they're the ones that are shown to have had the least of it in recent times. And it's just because they were sub-Saharan and trapped and pretty much stayed primitive, for they didn't have the interaction of all these Caucasians up here all across the known world, from China to India, all the way across Egypt, North Africa. Sub-Sahara is a haven that for Negroids and Khoisan and so on, but even the Green Sahara, when it was green, had Caucasians in it and people that relate to these ancients. And you look at the Egyptians, and whenever they try to claim the Egyptians, they show, well, you were these people, you were the Tamahu, and you were the Libyans and stuff, and they're pale and have tattoos and stuff on them, and that's all in North Africa. See, that's you. And they totally agree with the North Africa. And then you go, so they're surrounded by Caucasians and blah blah blah, and then they get real mad, and it just never works out for them and everything. But of course, what do sub-Saharan Africans have to do with any of that over there anyhow? They didn't even know it existed. That's neither here nor there. For now, we're talking about this. Many white students openly bought into this dogma, and thereby were unaware of the hard evidence regarding widespread white influence throughout the legacy of human civilization, and how much they had to do. And this concept of Aryan was never spoke again, of course, after World War II and the way that turned out. And it really didn't have anything ever to do with Germans. All the Germans are an Aryan people, and they knew this truth, and they went crazy about it. And they made things that were heralded all around the world, like the swastika, into a bad sign. And but that's seen worldwide before people that we know of were meeting each other, and that shows you that there are connections that the people were making before the last ice age that stayed and went on past. They have swastikas dating back to 40,000 BC and ivory and stuff, and all kinds, 16,000 BC in another place, and different ones, and they lead in. And it's amazing whenever you find symbology and where you track it to, and it runs around. And man, until we had genetics and stuff, we were all talking crap about pottery. and dental forms of people and little shards of pottery, basically, and a bunch of conjecture. And it's hard to get DNA out of somebody correctly, but now that we've finally starting to getting that and have a database, it's all falling into play into what a lot of people were said was crazy and some kind of white conspiracy thing as of recently. But as you look back, and even in some of my videos, I've shown where just in the 1900s to the 1940s, people were saying this, and it wasn't any Zeke Heil thing in any way. Straight out forward, who was in the Bible, and they were bitching because who's all these people trying to say Ham was a Negro? Because it's just showing, what is this? And, commentaries of just what is this? No one's ever said that. It doesn't say that in the Bible. Some people went to the trouble of writing this whole damn thing. Articles go in the paper and everything about it, but then that sure changed, didn't it? And nobody seems to care about it. Well, what's the difference? They've adopted our religion. Look, the Jewish slave master had that book. I mean, come on. Well, no, now they say they were Egyptians and they were all this other stuff, and it's really gotten to be a collective mental problem. And people have kind of garnered and fed that. And media and things have kind of garnered and fed that. Almost like a directive, but we're not going to go there. So this Arthur Kemp has done a miraculous job in counteracting these fallacies whenever he wrote these books, apparently, and I've got to get them. In the Children of Ra, he writes, and I just want to, before I even say this, I did my own Children of Ra thing, and I really just only touched upon it here recently whenever I did Children of the Sun and SunGod worship. And it talked about how everybody was a SunGod worshiper, and it all comes from a common belief, and when they figured out, and the seasons and things like that, and how it all works. And you can imagine somebody closer to the equator wouldn't have a good idea, but people as you got higher up would start to realize real quick when winter's coming, and hey, here them damn ducks again. And so it might start to correlate things together, and yeah, sure, birds gave signs. Yeah, and there's signs in the sky too. And he wrote them in the signs for signs in the heavens. What's that? For the seasons and everything. What is that talking about? That's it, because this is the way the zodiac goes, and that's that whole Ezekiel's wheel and everything. And people haven't figured out that it's a simple connection. And oh no, they didn't know about that back then. Yeah, right, they didn't. There's a little too much information here with them knowing what's going on and calendar dates and set. And we can even see how they screwed up their own calendar. So we do definitely know that. Anyhow, in Children of Ra, he writes, unintentionally leaked DNA results from a television documentary on the genetic testing of Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun revealed that his paternal lineage is 99.6% match with Western European Y chromosomes. I think that's a misspeak there, and I'd love for that to be able to say that out loud. I think the reality of that is that 75% and 50% in all of Western Europeans. And then it's 75, a little bit more in Ireland area and stuff, and I think he says something about it. And that's where you see the more concentration, okay? And if you took all the genes, they all can be found in Caucasians of North European, but they're not all that same haplotype. He's 68% R1 or whatever, and then the other part is still Caucasian haplotype. If I'm wrong, 7 Phoenician 7, correct me or whatever, but blah, blah, blah. But they supposedly found somebody through running through their database, and they got a bunch of people after hearing this, and they were given deals like hell, and it seemed like a ticket sale operation for people. But they found a kid that was 92%, and he looks almost like that Edward Vampire Kissing Girl thing movie. That guy right there that's going to be playing Batman supposedly in the new thing just came out with a 1900s movie he looks good in and stuff too. But it looks kind of like that guy's goofy younger brother. But then again, if you look at that kid and you said, yeah, that looks kind of like that King Tut thing. He didn't have the flat top of a head or anything, but you couldn't say they're brothers, and that was amazing. Anyhow, So Arthur Kemp further tells us the DNA test results were revealed on a Disney Channel TV documentary, King Tut Unwrapped, filmed with the permission of the Secretary General of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, Zahi Hawass, and we all know about Zahi. He had previously announced that he would not release the racial DNA results of Egyptian mummies. Now, here's the thing, though. He wanted to get it tested, and he was going to show the results, supposedly. And supposedly one of the sound men or something came out with part of this information, and he just blackballed just for even having revealed, and just a confirmation that Zahi and them were trying to even film the idea of him showing it to him. And so he was going to make, how much percentage correlation to the current Egyptians it has, and and everything else. And bam, 1% connection, and it's got European DNA and everything in it, and it's confirmed and replicated, and that's right. And so he didn't want to put that out. Aha. So he didn't want to put it out. Thing is they said things while they were showing that scene where they were going to start doing the reveal that they never did. And in that scene, you clearly see the computer monitor, and by just using the data on that monitor that he's showing to Hawass, it shows you his genetic connections. And they go, oh, that was somebody else. And no, come on, let's not try to play silly games. They have a decent idea what they're doing. Kip pointed out that the camera panned over a printout of these DNA results, and it unequivocally showed R1b DNA, a signature which is shared by those people in Scotland, Ireland, and Scandinavia, England, and Western Europe. The R1b haplogroup is one of the most common European haplogroups. And I'll tell you now, there's a strange thing where it may not even be from there and around in this Proto-European things that I talk about in the Scythians coming over I just showed you recently, and hey, there's been so little data, I don't want to do a story that only involves mythology, and I can't even put a piece of wood in front of your face. But now we can for that giant boat dock that we just found that's 8,000 BC that predates all of this situation, showing a giant boat dock out on the Atlantic, and showing you these people might have been those people that come in from the Pillar of Hercules from the Atlantis type people that try to take over everything that they talked about. It had happened at, damn, that correlates a time too with Plato and the Solon story. There might be something to do with that. But yeah, England and them didn't have it going on until the Scythians and Saxons and everything. Well, that's what we're told. But something drastic happened to these people in between the time we're talking about, and in between the Celts were there and stuff, and from then on. And it's quite possibly the cattle diseases that the Celtic people and stuff had brought into there in the first waves from back over far, far east of there might have sealed the fate of some people that there are only remnants of at this time, but that remnant still lives in the DNA of the people of that area. And because the other is so similar too, you see it in both forms, before and after. Similar pattern, run-wise. And I don't understand genetics enough to be able to run it down. If I did, I could find what I'm talking about, maybe. Where they know these mutations like this and this and this, and they're common to each other. So those two mutations apparently come from the same people. Oh yeah, well this is in Scotland, and this is over here in Scythian lands. So, and that's the same R derivative, so there we have it. I don't have a grasp on genetics enough to be able to even track it down to know what I'm looking for. And I feel especially bad whenever I try to do something like that, and I know there's somebody I could probably just ask and find out. And 7 Phoenician 7 does things with a lot of Middle Eastern at best, and Egyptians and stuff too, but she has access. I wonder if she has a knowledge that'll make that connection. Anyhow, to wrap up his book, The Children of Ra, Kemp states that the original populations of Egypt was of old European stock, which might lend to these people that were there before And then they say that the Egyptians are left over from the Atlantean people out the Pillar of Hercules, and from their standpoint, that would have looked even more likely. As the Lithuanian anthropologist Maria Gumbutas, which I've talked about a few times, described in her book The Goddesses and Gods of Old Europe, which I've talked about a few times, this population is also known as the Pre-Aryans. I call them Proto-Aryans. Reached their zenith in the Neolithic age around 7500 BC, and I correlate that date to 6700 BC and 65, and bam, and something drastic happens in another wave. But and occupied a region that extended from the Aegean and Adriatic Sea as far north as western Poland and the Ukraine. Later on, waves of Proto-Nordics descended from Mesopotamia and the flooding of the Black Sea around 3500 BC. And I still get that correlation too. The problem that everybody has connecting to them is they end up with a language that's not Proto-Indo-European, but everybody else is. They almost seem like the freak that's just about like the Basques are and stuff. It's like, boom, well, the Basques are left over from what was there before the run over of these people that swathed everything with a big paintbrush, and the Sumerians are too. Eventually, the Egyptians began interbreeding heavily with and also this waves around the Black Sea and things like that. At that 7,000 year date, there was the pre-wave that comes down. And whether you want to say they may have been a ruling class only because of all those blue-eyed statues, or they were the same, the one thing we don't have genetically is saying, well, oh, here's a ruler, and they do or do not have separate genetics from these type of people. And that would be pretty interesting to figure out and find out, but I don't know we'll ever even have that chance. Eventually, the Egyptians began interbreeding heavily with non-Caucasians, and this caused both the reversal of the original demographics and the eventual decline of their civilization. Miscongeniation has been praised by many modern academics, but in other words, our diversity is our strength. But the brutal truth is proven by science. It is one of the major causes of the decline and fall of all civilizations. The reason is that civilizations are expressions of a particular people, linguistically, genetically, and culturally. And once these three elements cease to remain dominant, the civilization that population gave birth to ceases to exist. Let this be a warning to our own European and American civilization. Arthur Kemp has made an extraordinary effort in making this point. Every book he writes should be read by our children. And I wouldn't know at what age, but they might want to get exposed to the truth. I've truly exposed my children to the somewhat of truth and everything. I just asked them, and of course the older two, really not even the youngest one has been exposed much to it as the older two, and already out of high school here by now. But yeah, what do they tell you in school about this? And do they even say anything about these people in school? And have you ever heard of Scythians? Or have you ever heard of this or that and everything? And just tell them something, just to share some time with them. And also maybe I can impart with them some knowledge. I'm supposed to be their parent. I'm supposed to be able to impart some knowledge and some things. And I would show pictures. And I've done it with the funny things about Halloween and Dracula and stuff like that. You know, just like somebody would tell a ghost story to their kids, but these other stories too. And my oldest was very into Greek stuff, so it became very easy. And once we started talking about it and making connections, she was almost making them in front of me as I started to point things out. And that showed me something too. Quite a proud moment. Anyhow, regardless of that, here's just one of the articles where his DNA shows up there and everything, and they probably won't necessarily ever come out and be truthful about this situation, and we'll have to just break through it. But because we just did a graveyard that was up in Central, not down in the Delta, and got people from the Middle Kingdom on out before there was any waves of others in there, and it shows this correlation of data that I've been talking about for a long time, and recently finding out the genetics of Natufians and the Green Sahara people and stuff, you can put that together and go, yeah, that's what we're talking about. And it seems to be, oh, it's coming true. No, no. Listen, it was always true. The other was a lie. The other was a politically correct, oh, it doesn't matter anymore, he. Why was Egypt thrown out? Well, with Libya and its problems and the problems of the Middle East, and the fact that really their people that are there now aren't the same and so on, and it's Arabic, and we lost it long ago and through the Ottoman empires and couldn't get it back through the Crusades in any situation like that, and now it's been inundated by all kinds of people. We're supposed to just let it go, and I put a foot down and I say bullshit. Well, why are we supposed to do all these things? We're helping everybody out as much as we can. We're not going to start saying, yeah, Ham's 3 kids. One was black, one was from India, and one was white. Okay, well, where's the Japanese at? Okay, sorry. So one was Japanese, and one was black, and one was from India. Okay, well, where the whites at? Oh, damn. Okay, so, all right. How do they have 3 kids that are? It's a story that people tried to make up out of it. It never says that. It was 3 Caucasian groups. Yeah, it's northern, eastern, and Mediterranean. Yeah, and that's where it goes. Hey man, I'm sorry if this butt hurts anybody, but damn, you ought to know the truth about life. And it's amazing that no matter what, you're still where you are. And everything's still the same. You just don't have to be all mad about something that never happened or anything like that. Isn't that amazing? But also, isn't it amazing, those Caucasian Egyptians, for they heralded mankind, and I hear they can fly now. And some even say they've gone to space and have been the reason that have saved us all, just like it said at Atlantis, probably over and over again, and people aren't aware of it. I'm not aware of it, but there are a few times you can see it. And medicines and things are really helping us to reach towards Star Trek times. And wouldn't it be great if everybody just got behind in a group and decided that, you know, there's the quarterback, we're all part of the team, let's enforce that and make it stronger, versus trying to hate jealously and cut that down and try to ruin it, which seems to be the current directive. And that got old a long time ago, by the way. Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And man, I got to get that book. Maybe my wife will get it for Christmas. You know, I always thought that was neat is all these inlays or pieces of stone that are exactly cut so they fit in there even with the bend. And there's not like one sticking up and looks screwed up or anything. And the eyes, they make the around the eyes and stuff. It's quite often one solid piece, sometimes cubes, but even in cubes, the one like this that they make, and every other one of these is blue. When it bends around the head, man, you gotta, what the hell? Somebody with the quality of a eyeglass maker is making those pieces around that thing. There's so many parts to ancient time, and we say, oh, it comes out of nowhere. And it doesn't seem like it just come out of nowhere. We just don't know what we don't know. Let's go. Onward. Hey, everybody, light your torch off mine. Let's take a look. This way. Come here.